Hi, this is Erik Stenbakken with the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast. Do you want to buy a short-term rental? I do. I want to buy another one and another one and another one. But guess what? Buying a short-term rental is different today than it was yesterday, and it's certainly different than it was a year ago. Kristi, Kandel, and I are going to talk about some of the things that have changed between then and now and why you need to be super careful before you jump into the short-term rental market. Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast. My name is Erik Stenbakken. I've been investing since 2010 and hold long-term and most recently short-term rentals. And today we are going to talk about short-term rentals. And as you would expect, the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast, we have some cautionary words for you.
I'm Kristi Kandel. I'm a real estate developer and investor, and I am a real estate development mentor, and we help empower people across the country to become the developers in their communities. So, Erik, you kind of hinted on what we were doing. What specifically about short-term rentals are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to talk about part of it today because really, when we outlined what we wanted to cover, we realized there's more than is going to fit comfortably into one episode. So this is going to be a two-parter. And I want to make it clear from the beginning that I am not pessimistic about short-term rentals. I'm in it. That's my space. But I want to urge caution. Short-term rentals around 2020 absolutely blew up. It just became the darling cash cow. And this is important. Everyone saw this as a cash cow, right? So first, of course, investors got involved and like, wow, look at the money we can make. And then the TikToks went out and the Instagram posts went out like, I'm making so much money, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess who saw those posts? You want to take a wild guess, Kristi? Who saw all that money floating around?
Everyone?
Everyone.
Including people, private investors, private equity, everyone up the food chain of real estate went, oh my goodness, now we can exponentially increase our cash flow by doing this. And you're right, at that time, you had to buy a property, list it with your crappy iPhone photos, and it would book 100% because we were in COVID and people were traveling domestically. But let me guess, it didn't stay that way.
It did not stay that way because guess who else saw all the money? Municipalities, governments, agencies. And guess what? If you flash cash around, I learned this when I lived in New York City, you do not flash cash around or you don't hold it for very long. Same thing happened here. Government saw that and were like, oh, we want a piece of that action. And they, in fact, did step in. So we've got a number of points to cover about why you should be cautious about short-term rentals. And this, I cannot stress this enough, is that the advice you get about short-term rentals should be current. It should be right now. And it's hyper local. I can just look right across the highway where I am right now, where on the north side, they have stopped issuing all permits for short-term rentals in the county, period. They've already outlawed it in the city, and that's it. They're done. And just a few miles south of them, it is the wild, wild west. We got another town that has no restrictions on them, and you can do whatever you want to for now. And that's a 15-minute drive from me where you got these two wildly different things going on. So not only is the information hyper local, but it needs to be current because what you heard on a podcast or a TikTok, it might have been true at one point. Also, it might never have been true, but it might have been true last week or last month or last year, and it might be very different now.
That has come up in every market that I've invested in. And I just had someone last week in California ask me, hey, I want to buy in North Carolina. They already own a few properties there. They were targeting a specific area and they were toying with the idea of buying a short-term rental. That way they could come use it on the weekends when they wanted to. And she said, I know you're the guru when it comes to short-term rentals from the people I know. What should I be aware of that I don't even know to ask in this market? The very first thing I said is before you even look to buy, don't worry about talking to your agents or anyone. Call the city planning department direct and ask them, what is your short-term rental ordinance? And on top of that, not just can I get a permit and how? What are you talking about in your planning commission meetings and your city council meetings? And what are the people from the community saying? Because just because short-term rentals are allowed, like Erik said, right now, does not mean that they're not about to pass this major ordinance that could overturn everything. And I think we both have some experience in that.
Yes. And it's just so true. At worst, they're just going to tell you, well, here's the link to the agendas and the minutes of the meetings, right? Because they're required to do that. But at best, you could get what happened to me once. There was somebody who was leaving the department. They were like, I'm on the way out. And that guy, he told me the scoop. And I was like, wow, okay, thank you very much. And I didn't end up buying there because he made it very clear which way the wind was blowing, and it was not in my direction. So how is this becoming a problem? Well, taxes and fees are going up, and those roll into operating costs. And in one of my markets, taxes went up 300%. Okay? The voters saw this cash cow and they're like, well, we want a piece of that action. So they passed a law and our taxes are up 300%.
How was that tax passed on the property?
If you advertise your property, you have to have a short-term rental permit and a permit number displayed with your listing, right? So unless you're running a super quiet operation, you're only renting it to friends and family, and you're doing it totally off the internet, the government can use the same resources that everybody else can to find your property. And so that's one way that they're doing that. And they've said, if you are going to rent your property, you are going to be paying commercial real estate taxes. Now, that's one area that the fees are going up. Another way that municipalities are looking to get more money out is commercial utilities. In one of my areas, I pay residential rates, but I have to do a commercial buy-in. So when I go to set the account up, they're like, that would be $1,000, please. That'll be $1,500, please. So that goes into operating costs. Another one is license inspections and compliance fees. In all the markets I operate in right now, it is required that I have an operator's permit, and it's required that it be displayed in the listing. In order to get that permit up in the mountains, they increased their permit fees by 400%. They're like, oh, your fees used to be this, it's going up 400% next year. And you know what? As an operator, you can't do anything about that. If you're going to operate in a legit way, that's just a fee you're going to have to pay. Another thing that rolled down the way was safety compliance. Right now, today as we're recording, I'm having a safety inspection on one of my properties. Now, it has been safety inspected year after year. And guess what? They're checking to make sure I have doors and windows. Do you think my doors and windows have changed, Kristi?
I mean, probably not. And if they did, you only improve them for the better.
Yeah, except I'm going to pay several $100s to have somebody walk through my property with a little iPad probably and go, yep. All right, that'll be $350, $450. And they're just going to take that money.
We have that same in Tahoe where we'll have a fire inspection every year, and they will go through for the safety check, make sure you have a current fire extinguisher, doors, windows, access points. If you have common walls that you share, they have a alarm system that gets activated with the fire department. So every year when we go through our permit renewal process in the Tahoe market, we'll go through all of those additional steps on top of the other county filing fees. So we'll pay the fire department, we'll pay the county. And then, like you said, on operational costs, our alarm monitoring system is a quarterly fee that we then pay on top. You are going to have a lot of extra expenses. So on top of figuring out, can you even get a permit and what the fees are, it's also dialing on what are the operating costs that go along with that. So you can make sure if you're buying a short-term rental today, that you're financially going to be okay, because you will make anywhere from 1.5 to 4 times what you could on rent, but your operational costs are going to be greater.
Absolutely. They are so much higher. They on the order of about 3 to 4 times higher based on my properties, in my experience. Yeah, because I have a property that has daily live monitoring of the in-house sprinkler system. And I pay a yearly fee, and it's not small, for them to come in and just take a look at things and like, yep, the red light's still blinking, we're good to go. And I hear people talk about, well, you could just skip around that stuff. That is not how you operate a legitimate business, right?
You've brought that up a few times, and there are probably 6 to 10 ways you could skirt the system and run an illegal short-term rental. But first of all, the minute you start lying, you have to remember those lies. It takes a lot of work if you just follow the rules, you write down what the process is, and you operate that way, you're going to save yourself a lot of headache. At the same time, by seeing the difference, you can actively participate in your local government, and you can
That's
go
right.
to those same planning commission and city council meetings and let them know the impact of these
That's
regulations
right.
that are coming down. I sat on the planning commission in Lake Tahoe for a couple years, and every single meeting we would have people in the community who came up and spoke every single time complaining about something. So to the planning commissioners and the city council, the squeaky wheel gets the juice.
That's right.
So the people complaining and saying, I don't like this party in my backyard. I don't like all this noise. The traffic's terrible. They left the trash out and bears came. They hear that, so they start to enforce more and more regulation. So you, as the homeowner, the operator, the business owner, should go to these meetings and let them know, we understand and we are going to comply with your regulations, but maybe let's look at cutting some of the fees down a little bit, and let's change from this system to this system, which will still give you the same result, but be much better operationally and save everyone time and money.
That's right. And I want to second that, because we may be tempted to think, oh, it's government. There's nothing I can do about it. It just happens. That is not true. I actually went through a process and got a U.S. postal mailbox put on my end of town. There wasn't one before. I went through the proper channels, got it done. Now, to our point here, after one of the meetings where they were talking about increasing the fees and like, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, I got the number of the board chair of the fire and safety department. And I had a polite call with him after the town hall meeting, which I attended, to Kristi's point. And in this call, I said, look, this is just really not fair, because if someone has one property and the work, let's face it, in the fire department coming out is scheduling it and sending someone out, there's really no extra work to have them walk into one or two more extra bedrooms to exponentially make your cost go so much higher. And as a result of that conversation, they actually took the inspection cost down on my property, $200. And that's for everybody of a house of my size. They said, you know what, we're going to just max out the inspection cost at this amount. And that saves me $200 and everyone else in town. So you can, in fact, have your voice heard, but only if you're a legitimate operator and only if you're participating with the system. If you just grouch about it on Facebook, that is not how change gets made, right? Just pro tip right there.
We've talked about the government, but the very first property I bought ran into regulation with the HOA, the Homeowners Association. And that specific community in Tahoe was built, by a developer, as a vacation home community for people to buy and have vacation homes. This was located in a county where they said vacation rentals are allowed up at the lake. They're not allowed down in the valley, but they're allowed up here. We have a community that was built for vacation rentals. But of those 330 units, only about 10 to 20 lived there full time. And you know who sat on the HOA board? Those 10 to 20 people. And they would flip seats every single year. So that small group of people then tried to pass a regulation that would ban short-term vacation rentals in that community. I lived there. I caught wind of it and realized, oh, no. In an HOA, if you get a third of the people responding to any vote or paying any attention, that's amazing. Right. So with that, and granted, yes, I was pro vacation rental, but what I really don't like and what I fight for is injustice. And I said, no. You can't just pass this because no one's paying attention. On my own dime, looked up every single homeowner and their mailing address, and I sent them a letter. And if I could find their email, I got their email. And I said, look, here is what the board is trying to pass. I don't care which way you vote. I just want you to know it's happening so you have a voice if you want to, because this could drastically impact our property values. If this even if you're not renting it right now, your resale value is going to tank if we now take this community built for vacation rentals and turn it into long-term stays only. So, and they were complaining, and the typical complaints you'll get both to HOAs and to local governments is too much noise, too much trash. They parked in my spot. Basically, when your guests are a nuisance to others, then they will start to complain. And they do have legitimate complaints, but let's talk first as people and get together and say, how can we solve these problems proactively? So that ended up being an 18-month battle where I have friends for life now from that. We did end up getting enough people to be proactive and vote and realize, no, not only are we going to not allow this to happen, but we're going to overthrow the board because we see all the other shady stuff they're doing. So then we got in good board people, and that led to just the community in general becoming more aware, awake, involved. And now there are even more friendships and people within that community than there were before. So it was wins all around. That parlayed me into running for county commissioner later that year because I realized what was now happening politically. Don't do it. Don't run for government. Fix it from the outside. But yeah, so just make sure that you're looking into any HOAs and approvals along with the city or county so you're fully aware before you buy a vacation rental.
Yep. And unless you think that's an isolated thing, it isn't. That happened to me. I had owned in a location for about 7 years. A new owner came in, moved in right next door to me, immediately got himself on the HOA board, and he took it upon himself to start limiting short-term rentals immediately. And what they said in one of the board meetings, well, we're just going to investigate the possibility of having a 3-year moratorium from when you buy to when you're allowed to rent. Because there's another HOA in our same market that does that. They just try to slow down the speculative flipping. And you know what? I'm not against that as a concept. But here's the deal. They were going to put that in roughly 40 years after the HOA rules had been established, right? And I was about to list my property for sale, and that would have a direct impact on my property value. And then an email came out and said, okay, we're going to vote against STRs right now. We're using Google Forms that goes to the board chair's email, and they were just taking it straight to vote. Turns out the board had hired a lawyer who had written new HOA covenants, and they were just going to vote it in via email right then. The short story is that didn't happen because I pushed back immediately. And furthermore, not to just STRs, but guess what? If you've got the same group of 4 people who are on your HOA board who take it upon themselves to just hire a lawyer, write new covenants, and then send it to Google Forms, this is not the last time you're going to have some sort of surprise ordinance pushed over on you. And there was so much pushback, and it happened so fast. Within about 3 to 4 days, the board president said, fine, that's it. I quit. Just like that.
I couldn't pass my underhanded regulation and get away with it. So, okay.
Yeah. So participate is where we're going with that, right? So what are the other reasons that STRs are facing some headwinds is because there are just some outright bans. We talked about that with HOAs. They're starting to push back on these things, and to municipalities are doing this. Now, remember that there's kind of a bullseye when it comes to investing, and the bullseye starts with your property, your exact property, but very unlikely there's any covenants or rules specifically for your house, but there will be for your HOA. We mentioned that. And then your town or township, that kind of a thing. Then there's the county, and then there's the state. And you have to look at all of those concentric circles and make sure that they're all green lights, right? Because if you've got one that says, we're okay with it, but the next one says, no, we're not, it's a no. All it takes is one red light anywhere in that concentric circle thing, and you're out of business. Because if your HOA says, okay, and your town says, okay, but your county says, no way, that's not going to happen, then you have a problem, right?
In Florida, I've got a 3-layer one with a property needing a permit from the town. So you're paying fees and getting a permit from the town. And they put a regulation and say you can only do X, Y, and Z as your operations. Then the county adds on another layer saying, okay, you can do it, but we also want this tax money grab. And the state of Florida also says, well, now you need these licenses and different things and this tax grab. So all 3 layers are requiring something from us for that. And each market is slightly different on how much they reach or not.
Yeah, I got some news for you. Your real estate agent doesn't have to know that stuff, right? Now, they'll say, I know about this stuff. Don't worry about it. Guess what? You should worry about it. It is on you. So what we're telling you is it is on you to do your homework and make those calls. Yeah, a good agent can help you, but ultimately, 100% of that is on you. There's a market just up the hill here for me in Estes Park, Colorado. They have a finite number of permits. And if you don't buy a property that has a underlying transferable permit, then you have to wait for a permit. Just because they have a permit and just because they tell you it's transferable does not make that true. There are other municipalities that make it virtually impossible to transfer. A county right across the road here from me here in Colorado The city council unanimously passed this thing. It was about a year ago. They are not going to allow any more short-term rentals. And the way they got around having to do a vote and hearings and blah, blah, blah on this is they said, this does not impact current owners, and current owners are allowed to sell their property one time and the permit transfers. They can argue, yes, we passed a law, but it doesn't impact you because we're allowing you to transfer it. But guess what? If I'm the buyer and I know I'm the last person ever to get a permit on that property, does it impact the price I offer? You bet it does. So does that impact the current property owner? Also, yes. What we're saying is do your homework, do your homework, do your homework. So municipalities, that's one thing. Another, I guess, just feeling like it's us versus them kind of a feeling here is just that costs are rising across the board with everything. And they will go up no matter who is sitting in what chair, wherever it is. It's just a matter of time. Unfortunately, this comes at an intersection. Picture a graph. Your expenses are going up on that graph and your income is going down. Now, why in the world did that happen? The short answer is inventory. Everybody heard that this was just a great way to make a ton of cash. So lots of people took existing homes, converted them to short-term rentals. A lot of people took their vacation homes. It was just for their family that they'd never rented out before and said, shoot, let's rent it out. Also, little mom and pop places, well, some big, like in the Smoky Mountains, that never even used to use Airbnb and Vrbo. You had to go to their local website because they've rented to the same people for 40 years. Those people started joining the big platforms and lots of building going on. So basically what's happening is the inventory is going way up. And to quote Mark Twain, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, is that Airbnb or AirDNA can say, oh, look, demand is going up. So yay, you get to make a lot of money. Well, the part of that you have to know is that if demand is going up, let's say 10%, but inventory 20%, actually that's a delta of 10, which means that overall in the whole market, your demand is going to be down, even if demand is up. You follow me? That's a really important thing to do. And that is what is actually happening.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I've got short-term in Nevada, Ohio, and Florida. Every single one is down in revenue, and people are wanting the cost of the stays to be lower and lower to even book.
That's a guess. Guests are pushing that.
Yes, guests are pushing that. Then I would say probably 1 in 10 guests say, I'm really neat, I'm really clean. This cleaning fee is too high. Can you cut it in half for me? And Eric, you can speak to this, but I'm pretty sure cleaning fees are fixed costs.
Yeah, not only are they a fixed cost of it, in our operations, we subsidize those slightly to keep them down. So if our cleaner charges $300 for a turn, we charge the guests only $295 because that just sounds just a little bit better. Now, I know some will say, oh, it's a profit center. You could just mark it up. Well, you know what? If you're renting a trailer in the Mojave Desert and you've got somebody next door that's going to do your vacuuming for $50 and you can invoice $60 for your cleaning, go for it, right? But I'm in markets where they're changing up to 20 beds. And this is important. If you're a traveler and you're like, why is this so high? It's because our cleaning company buys the linens. They take them to a commercial laundromat. This is really expensive because guests ruin linens. They just do. And so this is an expense that our cleaners have. They have to buy all the cleaning supplies. They have to provide the consumables. This is why these things are expensive. And all those costs are going up. And we literally had people stealing our toilet paper during COVID. We had to do this. And this is a sad thing, but these go into operating expenses. When somebody steals your pillows, which happens, our cleaners are like, this pillow seems awfully flat. They'll open up the pillowcase encasement and they find out they've got some 20-year-old gross pillow that someone installed in there and stole your good pillow. Like this stuff just happens, right? Overall.
Or when your cleaners tell you, by the way, the storage closet lock is busted off and there's nothing left inside. Just happened at a property in Ohio.
These things, I had it happen too. I had clean linens in a chest. It was a little wooden chest. And we had a little combination lock on it. And that way, if somebody, needed some extra linens during their stay, instead of having the cleaner have to go back and get it, they could just open this little case up on this trunk. Well, apparently it looked so much like a treasure chest. And our guests were like, we're going to get the gold bars that are inside that. They pried off the hasp and broke the padlock to find a couple rolls of toilet paper and some flat sheets. So it's an expense that you're going to have. So the expenses are going up. Cleaning is going up. Repairs, maintenance costs are just going up. And so you have to know your expenses. And this goes to another important point is that many operators, if you're buying, don't know their actual expenses. They do not have an accurate set of numbers for you. I'm just telling you that most people do not know what their actual costs are.
So, Erik, if someone's looking to get into short-term rentals and they hear this and they go, okay, I've got enough tips now, I can figure out how to dial in the permits, the taxes, the regulations. When it comes to figuring out the operational costs, what would be some tips and strategies you would give them to try and figure out what they should account for?
Ask a lot of people. I have a sheet, and we'll probably put that in a show notes with just a list of expenses. I think that would be good to give for our listeners, a list of expenses. Because one we haven't talked about that is huge, it's a really big one, and that's insurance. Insurance is going up, 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 and especially, I emphasize this, especially in vacation markets, because where are vacation markets? They are in the woods. And what makes up the woods? Trees. What's been on fire nonstop around here? So insurance companies they're raising prices, and in some markets you just can't even get it.
And when you're not in the woods, you're at the beach. What happens
There
at the
you go.
beach? Hurricanes. The higher risk area, which is going to be the places we want to vacation. It's going to be the beaches. It's going to be the mountains. And so insurance is going up. And in some states, insurance companies, and this is because of disasters, but in general, the higher the risk, the less likely they are to want to give you insurance. So they've had to pull out of some markets. And I know there's a handful of markets I'm in that if I default on my current insurance, I will not get it again. If we miss one payment, so we are so hyper vigilant on those because right now we're locked in at good rates and great policies, but we miss one thing and we won't be able to get coverage again.
Yeah. And that's not an exaggeration. It's something you really, really have to look into. Not only that, but just all of the insurances. I was looking at a coastal market and they said, okay, I talked to an agent. Well, how much is insurance? Insurance is $5,000. Like, oh, okay. Well, don't forget the wind insurance. Wind insurance, like, oh yeah, wind insurance is separate. Well, okay, how much is wind insurance? Well, that's $10,000. It's like, holy smokes. Well, I mean, at least that covers me if there's a flood. Oh no, you have to get flood insurance separately. I'm like, what the heck? This is nuts. Like, insurance on this property was over $25,000 a year. And so I had been looking at the gross income that was quoted to me, and I was thinking, shoot, my normal expenses run, 35% of gross income or something like that, depending on the market. I think I could make this work. Well, not when my insurance cost goes from what I'm used to, it may be $6,000 to $25,000. There goes your profit margin. So you've got to pay attention to all of these expenses. And when I say decreasing revenue, it's not this bad in all markets, but I looked at a pro forma just yesterday of a property that went up for sale. And in 2020, I believe their gross revenue was $240,000 on one door. And so people want to throw that number out like, you can make $240 on this house in 2020. Then 2021, it went to, I think, $195. And then the next year was $175. And then it was $140. And then it was $130. Now, I'm not saying $130 is bad, right? But this property is selling for in the millions, okay? A drop from $240 to $135. That's huge. And don't let somebody talk you into the idea. It's like, well, all you need to have is just better pictures. It's like, no, consumer demand has dropped as a result of inventory going up, consumer behavior changing. And I'm not saying that it makes all short-term rentals a bad investment or a bad deal. What we're saying here is be careful, right? We don't have a course to sell you to get you into to send $6,000 our way. And we'll talk you into selling you a property, which, oh, by the way, our agents represent and will sell to you. And once you buy it and you find out it's a ton of work, we'll become your property managers. We don't have that kind of gig set up. Okay. So whether you buy it or don't buy it, whether you do well or not, we're not making more or less. We're telling you this just to open your eyes.
We're telling you from the operator and the investor standpoint to open your eyes and make you aware of the great parts of being a short-term rental owner, but also the other parts that you need to be aware of to make sure you're making the right deals.
Make smart decisions. And sometimes having just a little dose of pessimism in there, skepticism, asking difficult questions that you might not want to hear the answer to, but actually asking those hard questions. In the real estate world, we call it due diligence, and you have to do it. And your due diligence is where your work starts. It is not just buying the property and running it. That's important, yes, but you have to do your due diligence when it comes to buying. And the cheapest time to do your due diligence is before you put down the money. We're going to come back with part 2 of this, and we're going to talk about some other factors that you really need to be aware of before you jump into the short-term rental market. Now, again, we're not saying you can't do it. I was looking at listings actually out of the country just this week. So I'm not saying that this is a terrible plan. I'm just saying it's a thing you can't jump into because you saw a sexy looking TikTok and you want to have easy money, no work. Like, that's just not true. Kristi, you want to take us away?
Like Erik said, this was part 1. We'll have part 2 coming up. If you found value in this, if you could like and subscribe to us on YouTube, on Apple, wherever you're listening, and stay tuned for the next show where we go into part 2 of being a short-term rental owner.